dobry, witam Państwa serdecznie na 60. Krakowskim Festiwalu Filmowym. Za chwilę rozpoczniemy poranny, krytyczny poranek z energetyczną prowadzącą Kają Klimek. Witaj Kaju, dzień dobry. Proszę bardzo.
Dzień dobry Basiu, witam.
A naszymi gośćmi dzisiaj są fantastyczne reżyserki dwóch filmów z sekcji Fokus na Danię. Dania jest tegorocznym gościem specjalnym festiwalu i wciąż możecie Państwo oglądać duńskie filmy w programie festiwalu. Zapraszam na naszą stronę internetową, gdzie znajdziecie wszelkie informacje. A teraz powitam nasze wspaniałe reżyserki. Good morning, Eva and Louise.
Morning.
Good to see you. Good to see you here at the Krakow Film Festival. We are happy to screen your films in the Focus on Denmark, which is the special guest of this year edition. And I'm very curious of your conversation with Kaya about your fantastic films. So let's start, and thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dziękuję, Basiu. Can you just give me a few seconds because I really need to close the window. There are some workers outside cutting and there's like a really big sound. So just 2 seconds, please, okay? This is never-ending story. This week, every time I start a Zoom, they start to cut, and it's not the deal that we had before. I asked them a few times, like, on what hour are you gonna work? But they never answered that. So just please let me introduce myself and you in Polish and start once again. Dzień dobry, drodzy Państwo. Przepraszam za te technikalia. Tu Kaja Klimek, jak zawsze w festiwalowym enturażu. Szkoda, że nie ma w tym roku takich plastikowych akredytacji, ale przyroda, myślę, jest nam wdzięczniejsza. To akredytacja zeszłoroczna. Bardzo się cieszę, że mam okazję porozmawiać z reżyserkami tych właśnie dwóch filmów, bo będziemy rozmawiać na tematy związane z płcią, ciałem, rolą dokumentalistki jako socjolożki, więc dużo ciekawych wątków, takich moich ulubionych, ale już przestawię się na język angielski, bo wiem, że być może Louis część rzeczy, które mówię, rozumie, bo zna język czeski, ale Ewa raczej nie, więc wystarczy języka polskiego, czas na język angielski. Hello once again. Once again, I'm really sorry for the interruption. I'm really happy to join you for this conversation for Critical Morning. I flashed my accreditation from last year saying that I kind of regret that we don't have, but it always helps to feel a bit more at the festival when you have this kind of thing with yourself. So thank you for being here with me. And as I said, I would like to talk not only about your films, but also about the role of a filmmaker as a sociologist, because it feels like your films open this kind of conversation, and also about bodies, female, male roles in the society nowadays. So that's going to be the topics of our conversation today. But I wanted to start with like a usual question that probably you hear a lot these days. How are you doing during the new situation, not only as people, but also as filmmakers? How does it work for you to be in lockdown? Does it boost your creativity, or maybe it just a bit like suffocates it? How do you feel in this new, let's call it temporary world of lockdown? Maybe we can start with Louise.
Yes, actually, I was worried to begin with because I'm doing a new documentary about elderly home with demented people. So they are in the critical group, but luckily now the restrictions have begun to disappear, and I'm able to continue filming there. So I'm shooting right now in this place for elder demented people. But I was worried that maybe I would have to give up, and if I should come back in half a year, maybe some of my protagonists would have, because they're very. So I was worried, but now I'm back on track.
Good to hear that, because of course, like, the topic is really delicate and subtle, and the situation wouldn't help much to develop the project. So good that the situation is coming back on track. And what about you, Eva? What about your process? I know that you just finished your new film, but how about being here now? And do you work on something new, or what's the situation for you as a filmmaker now?
Yes, I had a film out almost at the same time as Fat Front, but this one that we are talking about now is an older one. So of course we lost a lot of opportunity to screen the film physically around Europe that was lined up for this spring. Personally, I was taking half a year to follow my new film around the world, and then I was starting to look into new projects. And of course, as a documentary filmmaker, we are not as limited as fiction because we don't work with so big crew, but it just didn't really fit me to lock down at the time when Denmark locked down, because I was about to open up and go into the work for new projects. But we have to take what comes toward us. It's also something that we work a lot with in documentary cinema. So I think it's good for the world, and it's good for all of us to kind of slow down a bit and rethink things that we have taken for granted. But it is difficult to make films about reality without being able to really visit it.
Yeah, but did you come across any projects that were already being made during lockdown? I've watched actually a TV series that was screened on YouTube, that it was filmed during lockdown, that actors were filming with their laptops and their phones. Do you think that this kind of filmmaking is also opening up for the ideas for documentary filmmaking? I'm just curious, what do you think about it? Are we supposed to expect new genre, let's say, like lockdown documentaries? Like, do you think it's going to be possible? Maybe Eva now, I'm going to just try to direct the questions and juggle that.
Well, I think we need to understand that filmmakers like me and Louise, we are working on long-term projects that should also stand after a very actual crisis. We need to find things within the present situation that will also be interesting in a year or two, because the kind of thing that we do needs to not be like the news journalism that is kind of dead when the news has changed. But I think we will see a lot of people who have used this as a creative opportunity. But I also think that a lot of the films made under lockdown will not necessarily have the qualities to stand in time.
Mm-hmm. Louise, what do you think?
No, I was thinking that actually something interesting happened to me in my new film making, because it's about the demented people. It's really the core is and how much physical and psychological presence, closeness between people can work, because they replace medicine. They take the older people out and the demented people, and they use care, connection, community tool to create a good life. So actually, this crisis meant that it was so obvious that how much we needed as human beings to be close and to not be isolated from each other. And that was actually that's the of my investigation in this demented place. I think in some way it actually sharpened my focus and really made it clear all this human contact we need it so much.
That's true. Like recently, I've even discovered that if it comes to being in touch as we are now, that of course you are in Denmark, I'm here in Warsaw, and we discuss for the festival that takes place somewhere else, that this way of connecting through Zoom or Skype or whatever we are using now, like this special tool that the festival has created for us, that at some point we are putting their energy, but the energy is really difficulty. There is a difficulty to come back with the energy from all those conversations. So that's the syndrome of ausgesummt. There is a word already for that you have this like Zoom fatigue. But I hope that you're not going to be tired after this meeting, because it's as you, Luis, said, that's why I'm mentioning this, because at some point, on one hand, we are kind of tired with this, but on the other hand, it helps us to focus on what we are actually talking about, because there is no distractions, and it goes more like directly. That's what I discovered through those conversations. So even for when you work for a festival and do Q&As in that way, it has its ups and downs and pros and cons. So there are also those good things that are coming from that. That's what I believe as a film critic and journalist. But that was more like a intro question. And now I would like to focus more on your films. Because as Eva said, these are long-term projects that you really have to put your heart in, your effort in. You need to make a connection and kind of a relationship with the person that you talk about. So I wanted to start with Eva and with Charlie, because for me, like when I watched your film, it was really a lot of emotions that I felt as a viewer towards him. As a person and as a emblem for modern men, as you title your film. So can you please tell us a bit, because I don't know the story behind the film, why him? How did you choose him? If it was really difficult to get the access to his life, can you tell us a bit about that process? And of course, I'm not going to ask you about the first impression because it was a long time ago, but maybe you remember, or you have those feelings still. What was what did you think about him before the project started? And there are so many questions that are coming to the surface. So please tell us a bit about that.
Well, Charlie Siem is a classical violinist, and he's also very handsome. And he works the scenes he plays in Europe, in Asia, all over the world. He has his own fan club. A lot of them follows him around, and he also comes out of a very wealthy family. In the beginning, I was looking into the world of classical music because I have a taste for kind of things that are a bit lost in time. People who are working in kind of a time bubble, and I had just shot a film in Portugal in a very small apartment, and I was looking for something with more visual possibilities. So I tried to research in the world of classical music for something that was not about how to play the violin, but more a human story based in this environment. So it's not like I wasn't looking for classical poetry of a star in like one of the best in the world of classical music, but I was looking for someone who had a personal story that I could somehow capture. And then I read in a magazine, a fashion magazine, about Charlie, and he was like looking like an Elvis Presley 60 kind of style with this slick black hair and super handsome guy. And I thought that could be interesting to check him out. And I checked out different people at the same time. And Charlie was actually one of the only ones in the classical music who understood what kind of meaning a documentary could mean to him, because he was into his family are very good business people, so he understood the branding quality of a documentary film. So actually it turned out to be easy to work with him because he could see the fact that there was a film made about him felt attractive to him. And we started to work very openly, and I didn't know exactly how I could make a film about him. He's not a classical documentary subject. I mean, I think we need to expand the documentary subjects to be more about what kind of life we live. But we used to do documentary films about something relevant politically, dramatically, things that are happening in the world with big drama and big attention. But Charlie is basically a guy with no problems, really. He's like a first world man. He looks great. He's good at something very difficult. So much more delicate things that I had to look for with him. And it was quite difficult for me to trust that I could make a film about something very undramatic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like he's, as you said, first world problems, first world man. For me, he was something between Bruce Wayne, Patrick Bateman, like those kind of figures. I'm like a pop cultural geek, so I was like putting him next to those characters like this, because it felt like, oh, he could be a character in this kind of story, that there is some, and 50 Shades of Grey. Let's be honest, that also came to my mind when I looked at him, because it felt, and your film like really helps us to feel that way, that there is some deep darkness down there, that it's not only the story about the guy without any problems, but it's also a story about something more and something else. But can you tell us also, because the process of following the character, and as you said, you follow him through time and space, how long it took the whole project to film, and when you felt that, okay, this is enough, I got this now it's time to go to the phase of editing and to shape the story, because I feel that I really have those moments that I wanted to get to tell the story that I really wanted to tell?
I think I followed him for 3-4 years, most of the time just me and a little camera, and then in the end we had some shooting with a German DOP. We have a very beautiful opening with Charlie driving through the mountains in Italy in an orange Porsche. So he looks very much like a James Bond character, like the guy on the top of the world. It was one of the most difficult processes in terms of understanding what I needed to tell this story, because Charlie is somehow very professional in telling his own story. He's in like Vogue on the list of the most hot bachelors in the world and all of that stuff. He has a very strong, glossy image, and he's partly like that. But if we should make a documentary about him, we needed to dig a bit deeper into other layers, and that was difficult. Also, not to force this on him. I mean, he comes from a wealthy background. He's English, which is, I think, he's brought up in a very controlled environment where you don't flash your dirty laundry in a environment like that. So how to work in a way where he felt comfortable and he could live with the image that we put out. And it was very difficult also when we went into the editing to actually get him to like that he was also vulnerable. And I don't think he's that vulnerable. I mean, he is beautiful. He's super cool. He's very clever, but he also shows a certain lack of emotional relationship to other people. And I think it partly comes with being so focused on one thing. And for me, I think it's an interesting story for all of us that we are in this society where we all the time need to perform and be better than we were yesterday. And the sky is the limit kind of philosophy. Mm-hmm. To me, he was a very clear example of that. And when do you have enough of that? I was back and forth a lot of the time, but we ended up finding a way of closing kind of a full portrait of him.
Which is really interesting because you kind of show his body and the vulnerability of his body also, which is really interesting part of that, because he feels like this kind of superhero figure, but when there is a person that really touches him, he's like a child, and like something completely different opens up in him. So that was really a striking image for me. We're gonna come back to developing the on those topics that you mentioned now, but let's jump for a moment to Louise and talk about the process of shaping and curving Fat Front as a film. Can you tell us a bit about meeting the characters? Because as far as I read an interview with you that was published in Polish newspaper recently, and you mentioned that there was a casting process. So that's really interesting. And also, like, were the characters aware that they are part of a casting process for a film, because it really feels a bit paradoxical if it comes to the females that you talk about. I mean, Helene, Marte, Pauline, and Vilde. So were they aware of that? And like, how did you choose them? I kind of have an idea why those girls, because we have those 4 kind of different stories that shape the whole project. But tell us a bit about this process, and then I'm going to have another question. Thank you.
Let me start with how me and my co-director Louise Unmarkeld working, let me see, like a couple of direct. How we got into the world of body activism, which was actually that we got curious, provoked. On
I guess we have some tiny some technical problem with the connection. Is it okay? I hope that everybody can hear what you are saying now, or not. Hello, hello.
I'm here. You want me to do?
Co robimy?
I have full Wi-Fi connection, so it must be between Denmark and
yeah, intergalactic connection. So maybe can you please try to answer the question from the beginning with working with Louise, and let's hope for the best.
Yes, I was just saying that the film Fat Front I directed with Louise Unmarkeld, and we work on several documentaries. We have been working as a team of 2 equal directors, and I think we got both curious and provoked when we saw some of the body activist videos from some Swedish feminists, which was fat women, and really it was very simple, because they were just dancing in front of the camera and showing their wobbly stomach and big bottoms, and we were, what is happening here? And then we started to read and understand that this was some kind of new body activism going on. So that was the starting point. So it's not like you decide, now we must a documentary about that. You just get curious, and we got provoked. We thought, oh, it cannot be true. This is what we have learned, and what we have felt ourselves is an ugly body. So how can they seem so free and happy? Yeah. So that was the starting point, and then we just began following accounts on Instagram. And this is, I think, it's the first time that I have been doing research into environment in this way. So we just began following more and more Danish, Swedish, Norwegian body activists, and reading, because they write their personal stories also on their Instagram accounts. So we had this kind of secret casting, because we were just fun. We could really tune into who we thought could be interesting protagonists, and we decided to have some criteria that I mean, fat people are not very often driving a narrative in a fiction film or a documentary. Yeah. They're always the stupid or the funny sidekick. So we thought, we're going to look for a protagonist that has power, wit, intelligence, who really have an activist life, but also like have emotional dilemmas. So that was, but I wanted them to be not to be victims, because fat people always in some way. That's how we did
or
it.
Objects,
objects.
Objects in space, not subjects in space.
No. So we just we wrote with several from the activist environment, and then we got in contact with them, and we to Sweden, Norway, Aarhus, and Denmark, and it was basically it, because we felt we had already fallen in love with them on Instagram.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because you kind of knew them already. They were so open about their lives and they really shared their stories every day, basically. So you kind of feel that this is the person that I'm meeting. There's not such a... But did you feel, that's the question that I want to ask, when you met them in person, that they are the same as they were in their personas on Instagram? Or you felt that there's another layer of the story that you're going to be able to tell, or they were just as they were? Because some people, if it comes to sharing their life online, they are the same as they are in the real life. But so many people are creating those personas that we can, then we meet them in person and they are, for example, 50% more boring people than we expected, or something like that, because they put every thing that they have out there and nothing really is in here. So what did you feel when you met those girls in person?
Of course, different in all kinds of ways at a lot of other levels. But I think that because this process, we have really felt our own presence all the time. So I think when we met them, even though we were open and curious and all that, you have this prejudice that it cannot be true. It must be somehow be miserable and lonely. And to some extent, of course, because they have had lives where they have felt outside, discriminated, and their bodies have been commented on by their parents and schools. And so, of course, that to some extent, we met some very vulnerable people. But also, I think we were surprised that they were really, they were in a process really accepting and loving their bodies. It was not fake it till you make it, as you might think. They were really, really working with their own body image in a very sincere way.
Okay. And now I wanted to develop on the ideas that we talked about now, but to put it on this level of documentary filmmaker as a sociologist. As I said before, that really rings some bell when I think about both of your films. Would you agree that documentary filmmaking is a way to say something more than only talk about this general idea of a character that you're talking about, that there is this layer of more general topics that you include in your film? And if yes, like how that really works? Do you feel that filmmaking can be this kind of tool to introduce wider society to some different approach that we already like crashing through the stereotypes, for example, or showing that what we think about beautiful people is not always true, like those kind of things? Eva, can you please start with this? Yeah,
I think that a good story needs to have more than just that person in focus. It needs to be bigger than that, and we are always in the editing room discussing, what does it say to me? Why is it important to me? We can't finance the films if we're not aware of why this person can represent an issue or a theme or something that is new in our time, whatever it is. And that, in a way, is you can call it a sociological point of view on the world. But I feel that storytelling has always done that. I mean, if you read novels from 50 years ago, they will still be relevant on a kind of a philosophical level or existential level, even it happens in the past. And I think if we are very careful with choosing our subject and being good storytellers, we are creating pictures of our present time that should last for a long time and should be able to mirror those people living here or those people from other kind of cultures interested in our environment and our living conditions.
But what about masculinity in that manner? Because recently, in last few years, we always hear about toxic masculinity, that we need to work with that as a society, that there is, of course, Me Too movement, Time's Up movement, all those stories that we are suddenly facing. Were you thinking about like how the male role in the society was changing when you were observing and following Charlie? Did that come to the surface when you were shaping your film?
Well, I didn't see it so much as a question of masculinity, more about a question of self-performance and self-monitoring. I think that in the case, if you go and look at A Modern Man, there's a huge story about being a son of a very successful father and grandfather. And of course, that raises question of masculinity, because to improve and be better than your past is always it has always been a goal for many men. And in this case, this guy has like tycoons for fathers and grandfathers. So of course he has a really difficult task in fulfilling that kind of ambition. But to me, I wasn't looking so much for masculinity, because I also think that Charlie actually represents very much the classical man. He's not like in between male and female, or whatever is happening now, where you're kind of merging those two genders. So I was more thinking of him as an example of my own pressure for success.
Oh, that's really interesting, because of course I'm when I put the gender glasses on my nose, I always look at everything through that agenda and with that ideology and approach in the background. But it's really important that you said that it's a story about not a postmodern man, but about the modern man, something that is basically also like a role model or a shape that we take from the past and try to look at through from today's point of view. That's really interesting. I wanted to ask Louise about. Oh yeah, yes.
We actually had a sociologist working on the discussion of the film, and she wrote a book called "The Tyranny of Success," and she used this kind of thing that it's not good enough just to be mediocre anymore. You need to be special. You need to be a hero. You need to be outstanding in every way. And maybe 5% max of the population can be people like that. And the rest is going to just bang their heads not to be like that. So that was, for me, more my kind of feeling of the sociology inside of this story.
Thank you very much, Louise. Can we talk a bit about similar topics? I mean, did you feel, you and Louise, your co-director, that you are on the verge of this sociological discovery? I mean, because fat studies is something that we only start to learn about. We are learned all the time and taught all the time that obesity is the thing, not being proudly fat and different shape of a body than other people. So did you feel that you are kind of also educators on that manner? Because that's also part of the sociological approach to the cinema. So I wanted to ask you about that.
I think, like Eva said, in some ways we are, as documentarists, we want to tell stories to the world, but this is on a very unconscious level in the process, I feel, because it's your filter and what really makes your heartbeat, or what interests you, that makes you go towards the story. Not that you have studied the topic a lot, or maybe that you feel that you need to tell the world about something. It's really, I mean, it's much more in intuition, and I think that but it's also personal, because the relationship with my body, and Louise Unmark Kelsen, we have been on so many diets. We have sneaked into group therapy to try to learn could we eat in a different way so we can weight, because we have been friends and colleagues for 20 years, and I mean we have been unhappy with the shape of our body, even that we have all the time we have been normal weight. So I think that now when we are sort of middle-aged, it was the right time for us to do this, but it had been lying in us for such a long time. But I felt it was kind of the sorrow looking back to your youth and all the time wasted on self-criticism, on feeling not beautiful, not skin. So I thought that we would have done this earlier in our lives, because we were caught even more by the feeling of wrongness. That is, I think, it's a universal thing for women, but it really came from a personal point that we felt, hearing those stories from our protagonists, that they don't enjoy life. They don't go swimming. They had never been bathing in the ocean with their body. That they don't go out to meet a boyfriend. That they isolate themselves at home. All these stories really struck us, because you only live once. That's what we're realizing now in our lives. So, but of course, you want to tell. You want your film to make an impression in the world and to make other people wonder. But that's not the starting point. I
But at the same time, I think that it can be part, for example, of curriculum. When you teach fat studies, you can show your film as part of that area, just to educate people that, okay, so maybe you were always thinking that if somebody is fat, that means that this person is a bad person. But this is not the thing. So that's also like a, ideological approach that you can have in your film, right?
Yes, we are working on an educational material for schools, and we have had a lot of screenings before Corona in cinemas in Denmark, where a lot of people, and also fat people, came and really shared their stories. So we could really feel that an impact. And I think that all of the documentaries that films making has also, of course, had some social or something in society, but my starting point is, I mean, it's often something with all the emotions that we hide from each other. Something, and shame was something that I read a lot of books about doing this film. The psychological process of shame, what that will do to your personality and to your life. So I think it's the psychological thing that's really interesting in the process.
Thank you very much. I wanted also to ask you about both of you, actually. So I'm going to just start the topic openly, and then you can answer, because both of the films are also showing the world of social media, and both of the stories are really connected to that. So you have those characters that are always taking photos of themselves, or are taken photos of, and they are sharing or oversharing even their life. And we are actually living in the times of selfie is the basic form of photography today for people. It's not like posing photography, more like everybody's their own photographer at the same time. So what do you think as filmmakers, when you have all those materials about people out there, where's the role of a filmmaker in there? Because when you hear a word documentary filmmaker, it's about, documenting, discovering, like showing something that we haven't seen. And in the cases of your films, the things are already out there. So what do you think more in general about that For example, like the film that comes to my mind as a first example is the film about Amy Winehouse by Asif Kapadia. Probably you've heard about it or you've seen it yourself. There's this like amazing big story of a musician and a pop star, and all the materials were already out there. So he's shaping the story from what he finds and tries to tell it on his own terms, but the things are already out there. So what do you think in those changing times of, like visual culture flood, let's say, you can do as a filmmaker to tell the story in a different way? Eva, can you please say something about that? Also in relation to Charlie, who is a model himself. And of course, he's also judging his own performances, as we see in this scene that was like really striking for me when he sees himself with Lady Gaga and he's so not happy with what happened. Can you please tell something about that?
Well, I think it's partly a democratic thing that we can all tell our own story. And I read somewhere, I think it was the old philosopher Habermas saying that in every change where you kind of bring a new media around, people need to educate themselves in how to use it. So we have educated ourselves in writing, books, emails, but maybe we haven't really educated ourselves totally into the language of images. And maybe we haven't found out that it also needs to be limited, that we shouldn't all the time look at ourselves from the outside, because it means that we will never really be in a party or at a cool fashion event if we are all the time more focused on how do I look. So I think it's a question of time needs to shape the new possibilities of storytelling. And while that's happening in the field of visual images, I think that those of us who have been working with storytelling for a long time, we can maybe, I have an uncle who has been taking pictures for his full life, and he's been screening those pictures to our family many, many evenings, and it doesn't make a good story necessarily. But with Amy Winehouse, you have a good storyteller who can take that archival footage and put it into a context that is touching and enlightening. And that will always be necessary. And I think even more necessary now in a time where we are overfloating each other with visual stories. We need to it's the same with journalism. Everything can be written. But in the time of Corona, we have actually here in Denmark, I've really noticed that people have had a tendency to appreciate real journalism, where the right selection is done, where you really bring new information to the readers and not just repeating what has already been out there. And I think the same goes for documentary cinema, that it's fine that everybody can make the image, but it doesn't make everyone a storyteller.
Oh, that's a really great thing that you said. It reminded me of the words of Harun Farokhi, the essayist and philosopher, theoretician of cinema, who said that at this point in time, reading and writing is not enough. We have to start learning to edit, just to be able to take over the images for ourselves and decide what kind of stories we want to hear and what kind of stories we want to see at the same time. So thank you for saying this. Luis, what do you think, also in connection with your characters that are always out there with presenting themselves, with the images of themselves, and your role as a filmmaker is a bit different than just showing them. It's something more and something on a deeper level. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I think that this is just it's a new media, but also on an individual level, it's a new way of telling the world want to be. So, and that people has always done that, but in a different way. And I think that's as a film, will always be interesting to look behind that and see the difference between what the person wants others to think about them, and the things that you can discover on the other side of that image. So in that sense, I don't think that it's changed so much. It's just a different way of showing you to the world, and of course it's not the truth, because whenever we're together and we hide a lot of our true emotions and thoughts, and that's interesting. That's also, I think, the place where you can really find interesting stories. But for our protagonists, it was interesting to study the way that they used the social media. We didn't really dig into it as used it as archive, but we used it in the sense to show that they used it, and that's also connected to the thing with shame. That really the thing that helps you if you're shameful is group therapy. And was to our protagonists, the social media worked in a very positive way, in a way of group therapy, to be able to share, to come out with your darkest emotion, and also to be acknowledged from people in the same situation. I think that where we can be very critical towards social media and all, like Eva said, that we really need to as filmmakers and also in news media to be selective and to have somebody to tell the stories. But I found it was very interesting how the social media worked for them in a positive way, because we always hear the stories about social media taking down your self-esteem, and you look at other people's perfect worlds. But in our bubble, in the body activist society, they were really open and supported each other. So it was kind of a therapeutic environment that they had together, and they have together.
Thank you. So, like when you started to talk about the therapeutic part of being together in the community of fat people and sharing over social media, that also guides me to the question that I wanted to ask you both. Do you think that the fact that you made those films worked for the characters in that way? I mean, like when they saw themselves as a character in the film, that their story is told. You think that it, like asking that about Charlie is a bit problematic, because I can imagine that this film was like a gigantic ego boost for him on some level, but maybe when he watched it, he thought about some other things, or maybe he shared something with you. So I wanted to ask you that, Eva, like, can you please tell us what he thought when he saw himself? Was he happy, or maybe he shared something that he never shared before? I don't know, because there was also a question from the audience, from Bartek. Do you think that for him the film was kind of a therapy, or maybe he decided to actually discuss his life with professional psychotherapist afterwards, and you have any knowledge of that?
Well, Charlie is a person who uses the modern tools, so I know he's been into different kinds of therapy, and also the film has a scene where he goes to a body therapist. That's actually something that I made happen, because I knew that it was something that he usually does. He liked to use these tools for improving parts of himself, and this therapist is very famous in Denmark and is very experienced in performers. So in a way, this is not new for him to use these kind of modern tools for fixing different things mentally or physically. But it was very difficult for us to get the film right, in terms that Charlie could live with it, and we felt that we actually protected the story at the same time. in the beginning, when he saw the first cut we invited him in very early because we knew that he would probably have. He's a perfectionist. He always have a lot of things that he wants to change, and of course he wanted to change a lot of things in the film as well. So we had him sitting, I think, for 3 or 4 days, actually in the editing, only working on the musical bits, so that he could approve all of the bits that were in the film and take those out that he couldn't live with. And we had discussions about nuances and levels in the film of vulnerability, really. It was super difficult, and I must say that I'm not sure that he really came to like the film in the end, but he has somehow learned to live with it, and we're still in contact, and I like him, and we are still on a friendly level with each other. And I know that he has got a lot of positive feedback through the social media from fans, actually on him being able to show a more human face of someone who is very much portrayed as the perfect guy in a lot of the other medias. To many people, it's interesting to see that you come a little bit behind the scenes in this film.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting that different, let's call it cultural competence or viewing point, you get different film from the same film that you made. You know what I mean? I mean, for me, it's really critical towards this perfectionist figure that forgets about everything else. And a fan of a Charlie CM would say like, oh, amazing, I can see what kind of person he actually really is. So that's always interesting when you watch the same film through different perspective and different lens, I would say. So I can only say like congratulations on that, because when you have the same film and people can tell their own story through it, it's a really great success, I would say, for a filmmaker. I kind of can imagine that so many different people see different films in your film. That's what I wanted to say. Louise, can you tell us a bit about that? Because you were talking about therapy for the community as being together and connecting through social media. But what do you think about the possibilities of a film to be this kind of vessel? And if it was for the characters, like when the girls watched the film afterwards, how they reacted, what did they say, that it really gave them like okay, we're on the right track? Like, what's the story behind that?
Actually, they were very touched by the other protagonist stories, because it's a collective story.
Because they never met. They don't know each other.
They met in the community before, so they knew each other, but only not in real life, so to speak. So we showed them the cut individually, but then they came together for we did a photo shoot for press footage, and it was actually the time that they really met, all four of them. And we had a wonderful day with shooting in a wood, in a swimming pool, and they were just standing and each other or naked in the woods, and they just started immediately. But the interesting thing was that everybody of them had approved of the film and before, but when they saw it together, a new topic came up that they wanted to move further. So they began to discuss with us after the film had finished, that we had in diversity in terms of color of the skin or ethnical background, or even people fat and disabled, or should they be persons who are even fatter? Because in this world of body activism, and in the world as such, it's very important with diversity. And so we actually had a pretty interesting discussion with them in terms of our choice of protagonists, that they were all white female protagonists. So really an interesting discussion that showed that they're really full-blooded activists, because they liked the film, but then when it was sort of, they wanted to, and we could only say, this was, we chose you for your personal stories, and we hope that this can be, the first of many document fiction films describing fat women's lives and all kinds of. So so it's interesting. We ended with a discussion, and we
critical viewers, the characters as critical viewers, and as you said, once an activist. Once an activist, always an activist.
The champagne in the screening room, then we got into this emotional discussion. So that was what happened, and then we have been screening the film on different festivals, and also in Sweden. But unfortunately, the Norwegian premiere was, the film festival was cancelled, 2 festivals. So we're looking forward to showing the film in Norway after the summer.
And there's also a question for you from Bartek about the men. Where are the men? There are no fat men in the world, because that's like, not to be ironic, but we only see but this community also includes men, and probably there could be a story like that about young men looking for like their way in the world. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, definitely there are fat men, and I would say that our protagonist would say there are people of all genders who are fat, and of course they could easily be portrayed in a documentary or other kind of stories. But I mean, we just felt that this was coming also from ourselves, and we're just interested in the female aspect of body, because for women, the body is so much connected to power and the role in society in a historical background. I mean, historically, men can achieve power in different ways, in a career way. They have status in society as a privilege to begin with, but the female body has been a lot of women's way to achieve power through their body, because of inequality in society. So that we felt that these women saying, we're not interested in the judgment of men on our bodies, we want to be able to live in the body that we have, is also a way of gaining power, or taking the power back, because the men cannot control. If you say that, I will not shape my life or my body after your judgment, I will shape it out of my own judgment. So you take back the power. So it was that feministic historical background that we felt was because this is where the body activism started. It is growing from a feminist environment, but there include men and all kinds of genders. There were very, very few when we started 3 years ago, but I think men are, but it's really dominated by women.
Thank you. Thank you for showing us the background, because for people who are only entering the world of fat studies and fat front, that would be really helpful to know that this is just a beginning of a story, and that the story have another, like, so many different chapters. And it's important to, when you want to enter that world, you need to know that it can lead you to many different places. So thank you for developing on that. Dear ladies, and we are coming to an end of our discussion. I hope it was interesting for you to spend this hour with me and Krakow Film Festival. We tackled upon all the subjects that I really wanted to talk to you about. I hope it was interesting for you to be next to each other, because in my screen you are next to each other and your films are also next to each other. So thank you once again, and I hope that we're going to have a chance to meet sometime in the future and talk about your films. I know, Eva, that your film is going to probably be screened in Warsaw, so hopefully we're going to meet there. Louise, say hi to your co-director, and congratulations on your film too, and good luck with all the festivals that are maybe coming back to reality and coming back to life, and your new projects that you are working on. So once again, thank you, and please wave to the camera, because I'm always doing the screenshot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And bye. Dziękuję, drodzy Państwo, że spędziliście z nami tę godzinkę. Do zobaczenia na festiwalu w formie online, a później, miejmy nadzieję, w niedalekiej przyszłości gdzieś w offline. Dziękuję bardzo raz jeszcze i do zobaczenia.